We're moving here. Go left, go left.
So I am pleased to inform everyone that Seattle has been liberated. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, otherwise known as CHAZ, I think they switched their name to CHOP, but I'm told they went back to CHAZ, was a failed 4-week Democrat experiment by the radical left, and the results are in. Anarchy is anti-American. Law and order is essential. Peace in our streets will be secured. While the Democrat mayor of Seattle proclaimed that Chaz was to be, quote, the summer of love, in fact, it was not. And other failed Democrat politicians also remained passive or even silent in the face of anarchy. But while that happened, President Trump set the tone. Law and order must prevail to preserve peace in our streets. The president is not the Democrat governor of the state of Washington. The president is not the Democrat mayor of Seattle, but nevertheless, the president must lead by example and be prepared to act in the face of failed Democrat leadership, which is what we saw in Democrat Seattle and Democrat Wisconsin. President Trump has always stood on the side of law and order, and we are pleased to report that law and order has prevailed and Seattle has been liberated from the anarchist. In President Trump's America, autonomous zones will have no sanctuary. The BAZ, B-H-A-Z, which stood for the Black House Autonomous Zone across from the White House, was swiftly dismantled.
Welcome to the MTC Report, the news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.
Don't go anywhere. The MTC Report with Mark Taylor-Canfield continues next.
Hi, this is Mark Taylor-Canfield for the MTC Report. I'm reporting from Seattle near the CHOP Zone, the Capitol Hill Organized Protest, formerly known as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. So here's my report. Early this morning, Seattle police entered the CHOP Zone, pushing people out of the area with batons and using pepper spray, which, by the way, has been banned by the City Council as of a unanimous vote on June 15th. But apparently that doesn't mean anything to the Seattle Police Department, who apparently do pretty much whatever they want while thumbing their nose at the courts and the city council's oversight, much like the police department in Portland, which also seems to love the smell of tear gas in the morning. And it doesn't look like the city council's unanimous vote to demilitarize the SPD has had any discernible effect today, because they moved in as a military force would and were very brutal to anyone in the way. The police made very aggressive arrests that looked like excessive use of force. So 32 arrests have been reported so far. This is about the same number of people who were arrested during the sweep of the historic Occupy Seattle encampment at Westlake Park during that movement, also in Seattle. But early today, police attacked tents in Cal Anderson Park on Capitol Hill, apparently looking for inhabitants of the tents. They were aggressive and seemed angry as they tore some of the tents apart. As far as I know, most of the property of the camp is being confiscated and destroyed by police and Parks Department personnel, or other city workers. I don't know. Apparently that also includes community supplies and food left behind. So one of the first signs to be taken down was the black fist on the pole just outside of the East Precinct. Meanwhile, Livestreamer Omari Salisbury was notified by the Seattle Police Department that if he did not cease broadcasting from the Converge Media office next to the police station, that he'd be arrested. And SPD claims they've been empowered to do that under Mayor Durkan's executive order. And that order, by the way, will be in effect for 10 days. But so much for the First Amendment rights to peaceful assembly and freedom of the press, apparently. So as of this afternoon, Seattle riot police were blocking the street at Broadway and Pine and weren't allowing access to that area, so I'm not really sure how this is going to help local businesses at this point. But SPD swept up dozens of people in their raid, many of whom will surely be mistreated and traumatized by their experiences today. A lot of times Seattle police seem to tackle protesters, throwing them to the ground, and then sitting on top of them basically, or kneeling on them to keep the arrestees from moving. So imagine large officers with their knees in your back, on your legs, can be, hopefully not on your neck, can be very painful or very dangerous. And sometimes the cops just don't seem to care. But the FBI and the Washington State Patrol were also reportedly participating in the sweep today of the CHOP zone. And as I speak, crews are throwing the artwork and tables, tents, and other items into garbage bins and hauling the material away, presumably to the city dump. Because early this morning, there was a push right down Pine Street, and basically police with bicycles and batons in body armor, looking like riot cops, pushed everybody ahead of them, and if people didn't move, then they were arrested. Sometimes people just got caught up in the fray, and I don't know why they were arrested. But meanwhile, right-wing agitators are ecstatic that Mayor Durkan and Police Chief Carmen Best have adopted Trump's hardline attitude towards the protesters. So Fox News, KOMO, which is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, and other neoconservative media outlets feel vindicated after weeks of negative reporting on the Black Lives Matter George Floyd demonstrations in Seattle, and particularly on the CHOP zone. So along the way, unfortunately, there were multiple shootings near the site, leaving 2 young black men dead. And part of my sadness comes from the fact that the original issues which inspired this uprising may have gotten lost in all of the politicizing, the factionalism, and the right-wing lies being perpetrated about the protests, when in reality, 2 young men died, and that should have been foremost in everybody's mind. But be advised that protests against racism and police brutality have not ended in Seattle, regardless of whatever spin the mayor, Jenny Durkan, and Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best might put on this story. Because after weeks of triumph and tragedy, the community experienced an historic watershed moment that probably none of us in this community will ever forget, and we'll never be the same again. So, granted, the powers that be will continue to try and control the narrative, but in the grand scheme of things, and historically, I think petty personal agendas and politics will not deter an entire generation of new young activists from hitting those streets until their demands for social, economic, and justice reforms are met. Because most of the demands have not been met across the country by these protest groups, and they have not been met in Seattle either. But let's face it, the intransigence and extreme entrenchment of political forces notwithstanding, the up-and-coming generation is not going to stand for this long U.S. tradition of colonialism and economic or cultural enslavement. So many voices have been suppressed by now. So many people have been trampled on by this neoliberal drive to economic power that those voices are now speaking out in some sense of harmony and unity in this struggle to stop the police killings of black men and women across our country and to put an end to the tolerance for structural racism and extreme bigotry which still plagues our land. Of course, I'm only one voice. I'm just one person, and this is just my opinion. I don't speak for anyone else. And there are many now, I think, who are finding their voices with the support of their own communities. And this is a fight for justice and equality. That is true. As a journalist, I have to stand for freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly. We can't stand by any longer while the blood of the innocent is spilled in the name of hatred and fear. It can no longer be used as a political tool to get people elected. And as a country, we must turn this corner now and embrace a new way and a new day where hatred and violence don't rule us any longer. And we certainly need reparations and reconciliation if we're ever going to put the past behind us and finally move on into the 21st century as a people who might finally be awake enough to start listening to oppressed people all over the planet. And obviously we owe it to our own children to give them a much better example of how we can all live together and work together for a hopefully much better future. So I say, pay no heed to the naysayers and pessimists. That's too easy. Hold on to your hope as a beacon in the middle of this dark night that has descended upon our land. We are better than this, but it's time to prove it. This is Mark Taylor-Canfield for the MTC Report. If you want to hear more of my journalism, go to democracywatchnews.org, where I serve as executive director. Our podcast is Democracy Cast. You'll hear interviews with people you probably aren't going to hear anywhere else, in the corporate media especially. I also write at the Seattle Star. I've done film reviews, and I just wrote an article about Seattle's CHOP zone in the recent edition. So please join us also on the Jeff Santos Show, where I'm a guest every week, every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the Revolution Radio Network. That's revolutionradionetwork.com, and you can hear archives of all the shows, and it's streaming 24/7. But Jeff is on the air every day with some really excellent guests, some really very intelligent voices out there speaking truth to power, and that's happening every day, Pacific Time, noon to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. I also am a guest on the Tom Hartman Show occasionally, giving updates about things that are happening around the country. So I want to thank you all for joining me, and please subscribe to my channel if you find these videos valuable. We have over 440 videos now, I think, uploaded to the channel, and so I've been working hard at this for a long time, and I hope you appreciate what we're doing. If you do, then definitely subscribe, let people know about it, support independent media. It's very, very important these days when most of the media is owned by a very small group of mega media corporations. I testified before the Federal Communications Commission actually about this issue of the consolidation of corporate media ownership and its negative effects on the media, and we can talk about that more later, but I actually brought some reports with me to the hearing and held them in my hand and waved them in the air as I told the FCC about these reports that they had commissioned at major universities in the United States showing the negative results of corporate consolidation of media ownership. Less local news coverage, less minority and female ownership of media, all sorts of reasons, to not support that. But unfortunately, the Republicans, especially on the FCC, have been all over media monopolies and allowing that to happen. So it's one of the reasons why we are ranked 45th in the world by Reporters Without Borders in terms of press freedom on the 2020 World Press Freedom Index. And so you can go to their website, rsf.org, and check out the World Press Freedom Index for 2020 and read up on the United States and why we're ranked 45th in the world. There's been a precipitous drop over the last couple of decades, by the way, on that index for the United States. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all for tuning in, and please educate yourself and share the information, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, this is Mark Taylor-Canfield reporting from Seattle for the MTC Report.
The news behind the news with journalist Mark Taylor-Canfield. We offer you independent voices and underreported stories about topics you won't hear anywhere else. Join us as we delve into the deeper issues behind the news stories of the day on the MTC Report.